Chris, I want to give you a chance to respond, and then I do want to get to another citizen.
You know, there's a pattern you see of Democrats, which is they try to scaremonger. And so their latest villain is the Koch brothers. And they say this money in politics is what it's all about. But, you know, John Adams said, facts are stubborn things. Here's some facts. You look at 2014. In 2014, of the top 20 groups that gave money to politics, I guess listening to Bernie, they were all Republican. No, that's not the case. 16 of the top 20 gave primarily to Democrats. The top 6, Act Blue, Tom Steyer, the Carpenters and Joiners Union, the City of New York, the Democratic Governors Association, the NEA, gave almost exclusively to Democrats. Where did these mysterious Koch brothers fall on the list? Number 59. So they do a good job. Look, Democrats do great with rich people. In the last 8 years under Obama, rich people got richer. You know, the most stunning thing Bernie said is, gosh, Republicans don't care about young people or old people or people struggling. That is malarkey, Bernie. And the young people aren't able to get jobs. The people like my dad, the struggling immigrants washing dishes, have lost their jobs because of the taxes and regulations from Obama. And you're proposing more taxes, more regulation, without acknowledging what we're doing isn't working.
I don't think that's why they lost their jobs. They lost their jobs because, among other things, we have a corporate world who are prepared to shut down tens of thousands of factories in this country to move to China, to move to Mexico, to move to other low-wage countries.
So if you raise their taxes, do they do more of that or less?
Believe me, their taxes right now, you made a statement a moment ago about how highly taxed corporations are. We have the highest corporate taxes in the world. Is that what you said? Well, it's wrong.
In the developed world.
In the developed world, well, it's wrong. Nominally, it's 35%. But in effective tax rates, it is 14%. Very few global corporations pay 35%. According to the GAO, the average tax rate is about 14%, which puts us in the middle of the global economy. Bottom line here, though, is where Ted is right. We need to create millions of decent-paying jobs. And the American people are going to have to make a choice. Do you want to give $1.9 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%, or do you think it makes more sense to invest $1 trillion rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, our wastewater plants, our water systems? And doing that, we can create 15 million jobs.
Senators, we want to get to somebody who wants to create those jobs, and that is John Conrad, who supports President Trump and runs a trucking company in Pennsylvania. He has a question for you, Senator Sanders.
Yeah.
Senator Sanders, over my lifetime, all we've seen is more government and more expenses, cutting taxes from top to bottom or bottom to top, however you view it. Then we'll give some relief to the burdensome expenses all Americans face. Why would you not want a tax cut across the board for all Americans?
Well, I do want a tax cut for the middle class and working families. But when the top 1/10 of 1% now owns as much wealth as the bottom 90%, when you have a handful of people with incredible wealth and power, no, I'm afraid that I will not support tax breaks for billionaires. Now, I don't know if you were there when President Trump, were you there when President Trump came to Pennsylvania?
I was.
Yeah. And President Trump was touting, as I understand it, the repeal of the estate tax, something that Senator Cruz supports. That's why he was there, correct? Let's talk about the repeal of the estate tax. The only people who benefit from that are the top 2/10 of 1%. 99.8% of the people do not pay a nickel in estate taxes. Senator Cruz will tell you about all the farmers and the ranchers. Well, Ted, there are 80 of them in the United States. The overwhelming majority of beneficiaries of this estate tax that Trump was supporting are people like the Walton family. Do you really believe that the wealthiest family in America should get a tax break of up to $50 billion, that the Koch brothers should get a tax break of up to $30 billion? Do you think that makes sense?
I did say all Americans.
Well, do you think that the wealthy should not get tax breaks?
I did say all Americans.
Okay, well, I happen not to believe that the Koch brothers need a tax break. Okay.
Senator Cruz?
Well, let me say a couple of things. One, Bernie once again said, oh, look, it's the super rich that we're going to pay the taxes. It's the top 1/10 of 1%, the millionaires and billionaires. You notice Bernie hasn't responded to the simple fact that if we confiscate 100% of the income of everyone making over $1 million, it produces about $1 trillion. Where does Bernie get the other $12 trillion that he's raising taxes? It comes from the middle class. And by the way, if you confiscate 100% of a person's income, the next year they're not going to work or produce it if you're going to take 100%. But let's take what Bernie just brought up now, the death tax. I think the death tax is one of them. No, it's the death tax because it kicks in when you die. You paid taxes your whole life.
No, your family pays it, yeah.
Then when you die, you see two people, the undertaker and the tax man.
No,
that's not fair. Well, and let me point out, you know, again, the rhetoric behind the estate tax is, oh, this is all about the rich guys. You know, the George Soroses of the world don't pay estate tax. They have armies of lawyers and accountants. They do all sorts of trusts and generation skipping. They don't pay it. The people who pay the death tax are farmers, they're ranchers, they're small business owners. Now, Bernie said a minute ago, oh, there are only 80. You know, there might be 80 in Vermont. But those facts are not right. And let me give some real facts. According to the U.S. Agriculture Census, there were 3.2 million farmers in America. 13% of the estates subject to the estate tax included farms. 1/3 of all farmers are over 65. And if you look at from 1995 to 2016, 102,000 closely held businesses and 36,000 farms paid the death tax. What does that mean? That means a family farm, when the farmer passes away and his or her kids inherit the farm, so often the first thing they have to do is sell the farm or take out big debts. A small business, if you've got a factory in a town and you've got equipment that is employing, that has workers working, and the owner of that small business dies under the death tax, the small business owner doesn't have the fancy lawyers and accountants that George Soros has. So the small business owner ends up having the kids sell the business and end up having to fire the workers. It's not fair. Let me just
no, we're staying on the subject. I just want to introduce you to somebody who wants to talk about the federal estate tax, which, as you've noted, currently only applies to inheritances worth more than $5.5 million. We're sticking with this issue. I just want to bring somebody.
Can I just say something? Then let me just respond.
We're coming right to you after Senator Cruz. Okay. I just want to bring in somebody who actually wants to talk about this specific issue. Scott Nash. He's the CEO of Mom's Organic Market. He has a question for Senator Cruz, and then I promise Senator Sanders will go right to you after that.
Okay.
I started a grocery company with $100 out of my mother's garage, and I now employ more than 1,000 people. I am extremely grateful that I now qualify for the estate tax. I learned from my parents that each of us needs to help those in need while pulling our own fair share. And I teach my children those same values. I believe that leaving everything to my kids would deny them the opportunity to gain self-esteem, satisfaction, and personal growth that comes from hard work and accomplishing goals. So why should my children, or the children of any wealthy person, inherit millions of tax-free dollars while other Americans have to pay taxes on the money they actually earn?
Well, let me congratulate you on your business success, and I'm starting the business, Moms, you said you called it. I'm glad it's going well. You know, to be honest, the death tax is, at the end of the day, it's not about you or your kids. It's about the 1,000 workers you said you employ. And if you don't want to hand the business over to your kids, if you want to shut it down and lay those workers off, that's your choice. If you want to give the money to charity, God bless you. That is a wonderful thing to do. But I'll tell you, it's a terrible thing for those workers who are relying on that paycheck to feed their kids, to pay their mortgage. What the death tax does is other business owners like you, when they pass the business on, the simple fact that you died means you've got a massive tax bill that the only way to pay for it is to lay those people off. You know, the first question that was asked about as a young person, why should I care? A young person may be saying, well, gosh, the death tax, you know, when you're 19 or 20, you think you're going to live forever. Why do I care about the death tax? Well, you care about it if you want to be one of those 1,000 employees, if you want to have an opportunity to grow in a small business, and small businesses provide 2/3 of all new jobs. I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time in West Texas in the agriculture community, and Bernie's suggestion that farmers and ranchers don't care about the death tax, it is nonsensical. I have sat with farmer after farmer after farmer that has a lot of land. So under Bernie's definition, they're rich. They've got a lot of land. And they go broke every year planning and paying people's salaries and barely making ends meet. And yet the death tax would make them sell their farm. That's not fair and it's not right.
That's a good speech.
Thank
but
you.
It has nothing to do with reality.
I appreciate that.
Here's the reality. You know, after Trump and people like Senator Cruz go around saying, oh, it's mostly the workers and the farmers and the ranchers who are going to pay the estate tax, Steve Mnuchin, who is our Secretary of Treasury, this is what he said, and I quote, obviously, the estate tax, I will concede, disproportionately helps rich people. Yeah, it helps rich people, the top 0.2%. 99.8% of families of somebody who died do not pay a nickel in the estate tax. Factcheck.org said, quote, less than 1% of farm operators, less than 1% of farm operator estates is projected to pay any estate tax. Tax Policy Center said, quote, only an estimated 80 small farmers will pay any estate tax in 2017. Center on Budget and Policy Priorities said only the wealthiest 0.2% will pay estate tax. Here's who the beneficiaries are. And this is why the Koch brothers are spending so much money to see this legislation passed. Their family will benefit to the tune of some $30 billion. So spending a few $100 million to elect people like Senator Cruz is pocket change if you're going to, a family is going to get $30 billion. If you are the Walton family, the wealthiest family in the country, you will get up to $50 billion. So this is an incredible boondoggle going to the top 0.2%, $269 billion going to the top 0.2%. You know what I think? We had a young lady coming up here talking about the cost of a college. I think it makes a lot more sense for us to make public colleges and universities tuition free and lower student debt rather than give the Walton family up to $50 billion in tax breaks.
Senator Cruz?
Let me say a couple of things. First of all, you notice Bernie didn't say a word in response to my point that 2014 of the top 20 political givers, 16 of them gave to Democrats. And I will note, in 2016, I listened to a certain candidate, a senator from Vermont, rail against Hillary Clinton for being captive to all the millionaires and billionaires that have funded the Democratic Party. So I agree. And listen, I will note, your campaign, like mine, were funded predominantly by grassroots voters. You had a ton
I did not get money from a super PAC funded by billionaires, Ted. You did. Well, I did not.
What I did receive was 1.8 billion contributions all across the country.
Contributions?
Million. We talk billions and trillions, these numbers start. 1.8 million contributions. Look, there is power to grassroots campaigns, and both of our campaigns enjoyed that. But the modern Democratic Party, of which you are today one of the leading voices and leading faces, you and Elizabeth Warren represent the heart of the Democratic Party, and that Democratic Party is captive to the special interest in Washington, to the billionaires.
Billionaires. Oh my God.
George Soros, Tom Steyer, yes, they're billionaires, and they give massive amounts.
And the Koch brothers are just low-wage workers who are struggling to feed their families with their $95 billion in personal wealth.
Bernie, by the way, let's be clear. Most of the billionaires on the Republican side were not with me in this race. They were with other candidates also. Because, listen, you and I have agreed on one thing for a long time, which is Washington is corrupt. But let me ask you something. If Washington is corrupt, if both parties are in on favoring giant corporations and big business and big labor and all the people with power, where Bernie and I disagree is the solution. If Washington's corrupt, why would you want to give more power to Washington?